The world is throwing a beauty contest. The world's saying, do this, attain that, build this resume, accomplish this thing, beautify yourself in this way, and all of us at some level are in the beauty contest. Compliance to the world is compromise to God, and it's exhausting. At some point, there needs to be a holy defiance rise up in the church of God to say, you know what, no more, we're stepping out of line. I'm not saying we throw rocks at the world, but I'm saying we won't be able to love the world if we're in the world and of the world. King Xerxes loved Esther because she was already beautiful. But Jesus loves you in spite of your flaws in order to make you beautiful. Your past sin and failures do not disqualify you from being used by God for His glory.
In a story that never once mentions God, the people of God find themselves exiled in a strange land under the rule of a foreign king. With their enemies plotting to destroy them, all hope appears to be absent. But one very unlikely character is raised to a position of remarkable power, because even when we can't see him, he's working.
Here's the story to date if you haven't been here. Chapter 1 introduces us to King Xerxes. He is the most powerful man on the planet. 50 million people under his rule, approximately 3 million square miles of land. He has conquered Babylon. His daddy conquered Babylon. His daddy conquered Egypt. He's setting his sights on Greece now. He throws a 6-month party, invites all the military dudes to come to town. Where he parades his wealth out in front of them. It's a 6-month frat party, open bar, all you can eat, all the girls you want to have. They're breaking every commandment in the book. At the end of that 6 months, he's going to close the deal by asking them to join with him, with their wealth and power, and take on Greece. At the end of that party, he's so drunk off his rocker, he asks his then wife, Queen Vashti, to come do a nasty thing. She says, stuff it. He says, okay, I'm going to fire you. So he fires her. And then he does another dumb thing. He goes to Greece and attacks them, and he gets his you-know-what handed to him. So he comes back, discouraged, despondent, depressed, a huge portion of his wealth bid into because of a failed campaign against Greece. He makes another mistake by asking a young man what he should do, and his answer is frat party and virgins. So they gather a bunch of virgins together to get in line to try out to replace Queen Vashti, who he misses now 4 years later. Esther, we meet, is an orphan who's a Jew. Her family was captured by the Babylonians and then transferred to Persia. Some relatives went home. She stayed in Persia with her cousin/uncle Mordecai, who's raised her. They're both Jews. They've hidden their identity. They've suppressed the fact that they're Jews, they're children of God, and they have fully assimilated into the world. He encouraged her to try out for this little Persia bachelorette tryout to see if she can make the cut and make sure she lies about her identity so nobody knows what's going on. She gets in, works hard, stays out it for a year, has her one shot with the king, wins the lottery ticket, boom, mission accomplished. She is now queen of Persia, the most powerful woman in the world. That's Esther. How she got there, a little shady, not necessarily how you would encourage your daughter to live. Make sure you're attracted to rich, powerful men, sell your body for the kingdom, and the ends justifies the means. This isn't necessarily the moral tale that we tell our, budding young girls as they enter teenage years about how to be a woman, and yet that's where we find ourselves in the story. You tracking so far? Ready for the next part? Here we go. Esther chapter 2, verse 19. I've assigned some headings here to kind of break it up, so kind of chapter or kind of section titles and headings as we walk through. The first is the assassination plot, chapter 2, verse 19. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. King's gate, probably 120 feet by 90 feet. This is where all commerce happened, where business happened, politics, government. This is the seat of power. It's where all the action went down. Mordecai was sitting at the gate. Most commentaries think he was probably a government official. 20, Esther had not yet made known her kindred. You know what, by the way? I'm reading from the ESV. That's why you can't follow anything I'm saying, Bob. Sorry. I lost my Bible this week, so I'm back to the ESV. I apologize. Ask Jesus to help me find it tomorrow, and we'll be back on track next week. So if you can't follow along, it's because I'm reading the wrong version. Verse 20. Better than the nearly inspired version all you have. I'm kidding. NIV joke. I love NIV. I read it. Here we go. Verse 20. Esther had not made known her kindred or her people, as Mordecai had commanded her, for Esther obeyed Mordecai, just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthan and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Xerxes. So just in case we think King Xerxes is a sexist, he's not a sexist, he's just a dirtbag, okay? So he wasn't just picking on women, he'd pick on men. He would bring women into his concubines and harems so he could have them like toys to take off the shelf when he wanted. And then he would go about 500 young boys a year. He would recruit, and he would bring them into his palace, castrate them, and put them in his service. So it shouldn't find a surprise to anybody here that a couple of them are a little angry, okay? You don't have to be a huge theologian to connect those dots. It's like, I'm a eunuch and I want to kill him. I like these guys. So that's where they're at. Verse 22, and this came to the knowledge of Mordecai, and he told it to Queen Esther, and Esther told the king in the name of Mordecai. When the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows, and it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Herodotus, the Greek historian, notes this as well. A plow was overthrown by an unknown man, a man at the gate. And so this is the introduction of the main plot line that will now drive the rest of the story. We're just kind of setting things up to date, setting characters. Now we have the main plot of the whole deal. It gets recorded in the annals of history for all time. And Mordecai had a question to answer. Do I reveal what I know that will save the king's life, or do I not reveal what I know and he'll probably be dead? And he chooses to reveal what he knows, and he saves the king's life. And we're not given a hint to his motives in this text, but I think we get hints later as to why he did. And if you read this from front to back and without thinking, you think, oh, what a noble guy. I want to encourage you to hold that card to play just yet. Noble, maybe, but maybe not. They do a congressional hearing, comes out as is guilty. Not so much like, Western hanging, with the boots and the rope and the thing. More like probably nailed or impaled on a piece of wood. Persians originated crucifixion. Romans perfected crucifixion. There's a good chance this was not nearly as humane as mere hanging, probably impaling or crucifying. That was the cost of treason. CNN, national news, headline news. Assassination plot, wrinkled. Assassination plot uncovered. Assassination plot stuffed, put down. Secrets emerge, FBI files found out, just in the nick of time. Mordecai is a big deal. After this happens, what do you expect to be given to the man who saved the king's life? Some form of a what? That's what I would think too. Let's see what happens. The asinine promotion. The asinine promotion. And yes, I do alliterate at 1 a.m. on Sundays. Here we go. Chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, King Xerxes promoted who? Haman. That's weird. The Agagite. That's even weirder. The son of Hamadatha. That's even crazier. And advanced him and set his throne. He got a throne above all the other officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had commanded concerning him. Now we're introduced to the antagonist of the story, the real dirtbag who's going to really drive the plot of the book of Esther. Now we know Haman's a bad dude from the outset for several reasons. First of all, the king in an honor culture had to command people to bow to him. Okay? Now in an honor culture, it's instinctive. It's natural. It's not compromising your religion. It's not idolatry. It's a salute. In the military, you salute. In this culture, you bow. It's a sign of honor and respect given to somebody older than you or someone in authority over you. And so we know for a fact for the king to have to command this to happen, Haman was probably a sketchy dude. Not a man worthy of honor and respect, so the king has to honor men to give it to him. Secondly, there's a hint in the text that he's a dirtbag because of his name. Now, in Hebrew writing, it's very true that the first thing said about a person in the story is the most important thing about them. It's the most identifying feature that the author wants you to connect with for them in this story. There may be lots of things true about them, but what the author includes is what he wants you to know. So when he introduces us to King Xerxes, he says, King Xerxes, chapter 1, verse 1, the man who ruled over 127 provinces. What's the big idea here? Okay, this guy is wealthy and powerful and mighty and sovereign. when we're introduced to Mordecai, it says he was from the tribe of Benjamin. Oh, he's a Benjamite. Okay, that's the most important thing about Mordecai for this story. When we meet Esther, it says that she had a lovely figure and was beautiful to look at. Okay, the most important thing about her we need to know is that she was a hottie, okay? We get to Haman here, and the first thing they say about him is that he was an Agagite. What does that mean? Well, if you go back in Jewish history, in 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, Chronicles, whatever, you'll find that the people of God, when they came together as covenant people, wanted a king. And he's like, you don't want a king? They're like, we want a king. You don't want a king? Yes, we do. Finally, God gives them, and he gives them who? Good, somebody else. Saul, there we go. So he gives them Saul. Saul, good king, bad king? Yeah, not so good. Started out good, and then kind of finished really lame. The first king to attack God's covenant people was King Agag. He begins terrorizing the people of God unnecessarily, without explanation. So God commands King Saul to act in his people's defense to attack and to neutralize this threat. King Saul does so, but he doesn't complete the task. He takes it upon himself to adjust and tweak God's commands so that his obedience is not complete, but it's partial. And what do all the good parents, Molly, in the room say? Partial obedience is what? Disobedience. It's not obedient to my request or command to clean up the dishes if my children take 3 of the 72 dishes and put them away. That's called partial obedience, not complete obedience. That's what Saul does. He's like, well, I'll be in the general area of God's command, but I'm not going to necessarily, that was a little rough, don't you think? I mean, everybody, so Saul tweaks God's commands, spares King Agag, his wife, his family, spares all the animals God said not to take, brings them back, and Samuel says, what is that I hear? The bleating of sheep. Oh, well, I brought him to make sacrifices to God. Now Saul's, using God as an excuse for his disobedience, which never goes well, by the way. Balcony, just let, a little extra for the balcony there. Never goes well to do that. So just write that down. And Samuel says, this day forward, your kingdom will be taken from you because you can't be trusted with it. No, please, no. And that's the end of the story, okay? King Agag lives, right? The king of the Amalekites. And who is now the perennial enemy of the Jewish covenant people of God? The Amalekites, the Agagites. And so when we read Haman, he's an Agagite. Are you kidding me? Saul's disobedience is still rippling out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later by people who hate God's people. Partial obedience just never goes well. So, the asset acquisition pitch. Yes, my alliteration was on fire last night. The asset acquisition pitch. Esther chapter 3, verse 7. It's important to understand this as an asset acquisition pitch. Otherwise, we won't understand the problem in the book. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of the king Xerxes, they cast that is, they cast lots, before Haman day after day, and they cast it month after month until the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. When then Haman said to King Xerxes, there is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed. And if I was reading my kids, there's a certain people scattered abroad. And they're like, they know by the sound of my voice, this guy's a scumbag. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people. And they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's, what's the word? Well, you don't have your NIV. My Bible says it's not to the king's profit to tolerate them. What does your NIV say? Best interest, okay? So it's not in your best interest. It's not for the king's profit to tolerate them. If it pleases the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. That's the asset acquisition pitch. He casts lots at the top of the section, intentionally hoping to hear from the demonic deities, the demonic little g gods, to know what he should do. So it's the sin of divination. He then goes into the king and he angles his story by filtering the facts so as to leave out things that are irrelevant to his agenda. Ever had that happen to you before? Someone comes and says, hey, I heard you so and so and so. I'm like, what? I had someone tell me, hey, I heard you don't let women take communion at your church. I was like, what? It's like, well, yeah, so-and-so said that. I think they were angling the facts with a filter to communicate something, that aligned with their agenda, not the truth. You ever that happen to you? That's what Haman's doing here. And then look what he appeals to. He doesn't appeal to a fear of loss of power. He appeals to the pocketbook. He doesn't say, look, there's a people in your kingdom, they don't obey your laws, and they might rise up and overthrow you. We need to put them down. He says, I just think they're not helping the bottom line here. I don't think they're an asset. I think they're an obligation. I think these things, they're not helping us here. But you know what? If we destroy them, I mean top to bottom, soup to nuts, they're gone. And then we acquire their assets, eminent domain, pick their stuff. 10,000 talents, silver, boom, in the treasury. Now, commentaries put King Xerxes' total, net value around 14,000 talents of silver because he had greatly depleted because of the failed campaign against the Greeks. So this is almost going to double, his GDP. Like, hey, this could almost double how much money I got coming in. Okay. It's a asset acquisition pitch from Haman so that he could push his agenda and accomplish the fulfilling of a profound amount of hate toward one man and his people. And at this moment, you notice that it's not just Mordecai and then people in the immediate city of Susa that would be a threat. This is all the people in the land. So all the unknowing Jews in Jerusalem with Ezra and Nehemiah trying to get the temple built and the walls built, like they are now in danger. Okay, they're now going to be in danger. So that's the pitch. Last part of the story, the annihilation proclamation. Let's look at start at verse 10. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. See how it repeats it there? And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of all the people, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. Don't miss what's happening here. The king issues a decree, and that decree is going to be translated now and go out and be carried to every tribe, nation, tongue, and the decree bears the news of death. Okay? It was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters are sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instructions to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old women and children in one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. So just so we know what's happening here. This is go and by force round them up and annihilate them. This is racial genocide. This is foreshadowing Hitler and the Third Reich. This is go kill men because they're defenseless and have nothing to defend themselves with, no weapons to defend themselves with. Go kill the women who will not have anyone to defend them once the men are gone. Go kill old women who can't get up out of their chair and run away. Go kill old men who can't hear you kicking the door. Go kill the little girls with the pigtails riding their bikes out in the front yard. And go kill all the little boys playing wiffle ball in the backyard. And then the women who are pregnant put a bullet in their head and then kill the baby in their womb and then drag their bodies out. We don't want to spend overhead burying them. So just dig a hole somewhere and stick them in it and light them on fire or something, but just don't mess up the assets. So make sure you clean the blood up on the floor because what we want is their stuff. Okay? So this is like Sheriff Brian Burnett getting a literal federal stamp like, President's seal. You need to organize and mobilize all your deputy sheriffs to go find a certain people group in your community, and on this day, 11 months from now, wipe them out. And then take all their stuff and then send it back to Washington, D.C. Like that's what's happening right here. If you need resources, bullets, guns, more soldiers, we'll send you some National Guard guys. Just make sure you get it done so we can move on. And sometimes we don't read the story with enough vivid detail to understand the kind of tension going on here. Look what happens next. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. They just closed a big business deal. Drinking a cigar, this is awesome. We're gonna double our national wealth in one day. Art of the deal. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. So we have this satanic, demonic embodiment of evil. It's not of God, it's of Satan. Satan brings death, unvarnished, unmasked, hideous evil from an unrepentant man and an evil man. And a side note here, I think the reason the city of Susa was thrown into confusion was that Jews were liked. These are our friends. We do business with these guys and gals. Like, we hang out with them. Like, we're in mops together, you know? It's just, what's the problem here? Think of the psychological pathologies created and dysfunctions created and stress created by that order, not just on the Jews, but on the entire kingdom. By some self-absorbed idiot in the palace who's completely disconnected from the real people in his kingdom. I got to help turn in my friends, or I'll be murdered too. This is 1930s and early 40s all over again in Germany, right? Side note, this one's free of charge. We don't understand this because we don't experience persecution in America. And if you think you have, you really haven't. You know, well, my boss, you know, he didn't give me that raise because I play Caleb. No, you're just obnoxious. You know. I mean, like when I've ever been tempted to think I've been persecuted, you know, article here in the paper here and there, I just go, okay, wait. I didn't get impaled on a pole today. I'm okay. Right? But we should live in such a way that if a decree was issued, there'd be confusion in the city. Because we should be loved not just by those that are lovely, we should be loved by those who are unlovable. Meaning our job as Christians is not just to love Christians. Our job is to love everybody God's put in our life. And if Grace City Church lives and loves and follows Jesus and not just preaches about but embodies the kingdom of God, it would be my hope that there would be a lot of confusion in our city if this order got passed down to persecute us. Because, you know, we don't agree with them or adhere to what they say, or their sexual ethics kind of narrow, but they're very nice and they're very loving and they're very kind and they're very gracious, and one thing you can't fault them for is sacrificing their resources for the good of the city. And they loved me when I was down, and they took some punches for me when no one else would stand up for me. And they were integrity, and they were honor, and they were helpful, and they were beneficial to our community. If the church isn't living that way, then we're doing something wrong. God's called us to love not just those who are easy to love. He's called us to love our community that we live in, as we remind ourselves that we're not so easy to love ourselves. So that's the story. Got a lot of ground to cover, so let's go right to what we can learn from it. Here's some questions we need to ask ourselves. 3 key questions specifically, and these aren't necessarily going to be fun questions. And so I asked myself last night, why did I plan to preach Esther chapter 3 on our 10th anniversary? It's a fun day, and this sermon is like a, punch you in the throat sermon. So I was like, who planned that? And then the answer to that, I did. Okay, well, fire myself. So at this point in the story, pretty dim, pretty low, pretty dark, not a lot of hope. And we got to stop here because we can't keep moving. But so where we're stopping is pretty dark. So question number 1 that we should ask ourselves in this text is, how are you like Mordecai? Or how am I, if you're asking yourself, how am I like Mordecai? And the operative word here is hypocrisy. How am I like Mordecai in his hypocrisy? And his hypocrisy gets expressed in 2 ways. The first is through his cultural Jewishness, or for us, we'd say our cultural Christianity. And this is what I mean by this. What I'm not saying is that what you should do is lead with Jesus wherever you go. Okay? So you go in for a job interview, Hello, thanks for coming. Nice to meet you. Did you know I love Jesus? Hey, that's great. So why'd you come in today? Well, I read a book about him every day. Pray to him every day. Worship him every Sunday with a bunch of other folks who believe the same thing. We exist to help more people know Jesus, love Jesus, follow. Do you know Jesus? Do you love Jesus? Do you follow Jesus? I got a shirt here that says Jesus on it. And you're just like, that's why you don't have a job, right? That's why you're unemployed. Like, you're not like, being faithful to Jesus. You're being obnoxious for Jesus. So what I'm not going to argue for here is an obnoxious faith. What I am going to argue for is a public faith. To this point in the story, Mordecai had suppressed and hidden and covered up his identity in God because it was not to his advantage. He's fully living in the world. He's probably a government official of Persia, and it was not perceived by him for a public admission of Jewishness to help him advance up the worldly ladder. So we'll just keep that hush, hush, hush. Oh, and by the way, Esther, who does everything I say because she's like a daughter to me and she trusts me, I'm going to tell you to bury your allegiance to God too, and to sacrifice and compromise everything that will be good and holy and right and true to a Jewish person, to go get in line, to do your tryout with the king. And if you win, you could get some pretty big power. The sacrifice it's hard to play the game, but boy, the payoff is big. That's Mordecai to date. That's cultural Christianity. This whole, my faith's private, baloney. Because the nature of loving something or someone is that love inevitably becomes public. Because to fulfill the experience of love and the experience of joy you get from loving and being loved from that thing or someone is to be public about it. Which is why I get really suspicious being around guys that never talk about their wife. It's like, how's your wife? Oh, she's good. Yeah. Dude, how about the Mariners? Like, if you ask me about my wife, you got about a 5-second window, and then you better strap on because you're going to get an earful about how amazing she is, and how beautiful she is, and how godly she is, and how hardworking she is, and how far closer to Jesus she is. And I'm hoping to heaven just to be able to get a glance at her because she'll be so much closer to the throne than I'll be even allowed to probably. Like, that's what you're going to get if you talk to me about my wife Sharon. Because my love for her is not fully completed or enjoyed until I can go public with it. Just like when you eat a good burger somewhere and you're like, oh my goodness sakes, I got to tell somebody about this burger. Or you see a movie and you hang out with your friends that afternoon, what will probably never not happen? That was a double negative, I realized. What will never happen in that conversation? You not mention this awesome movie you just saw? Because as humans, we're wired to go public with what we love. And so I'm not arguing for an obnoxious faith. I am arguing for a public faith that talks openly and freely about those things that we love, namely Jesus Christ. And how this gets worked out, I get different from every folks. I've been with some folks, at a restaurant, and a waiter comes up and like, hey, we're Christians, can we pray for you? And I'm always like this, I'm not here right now, get on my phone, check Facebook. I just hate that. Pastors are the worst violators of that. And then there's one pastor, he prays for him right there. Like, can I pray for you right now? I'm like, look, dude, I'm pretty sure her boss isn't impressed by that right now. And everyone else is remember going, look at that guy, look at that schmuck. How do you think he is? Like, stop, like, she's got a job to do. Pass her a card, more my style, or how can we pray for you? Okay, great, we're praying for you, whatever. That's just me. I'm sure he's led lots of folks to Jesus for coming, and I got to ask forgiveness for this later, and lightning strike me. So whatever. You work it out. If you do that, though, just don't tell me to go to Grace City, okay? I'm kidding. We got to work out how our faith goes public. I get that. But don't be obnoxious. But don't be secretly either. Oh, I have a privatized faith. Really? I think that means you're a hypocrite. You're a cultural Christian. Secondly, we see Mordecai's hypocrisy, in not only his cultural Christianity, but in his convenient Christianity. If you look at the text, what's the reason that he gives for not bowing to Haman? You see what he says here in the text? Look at verse 4. And when they spoke to Mordecai day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a what? A Jew. Well, now he goes public? Weird place to draw the line, right? I mean, like, don't tell anybody, make Esther bury it, get in the sex competition to become the queen. Like, don't tell anybody. She's still not telling anybody according to his command in the last part of chapter 2. And now he decides to draw the line. That's so weird, right? Because people read the story, they're looking for moral, examples to follow, heroes in the faith. And we've said already, there are no heroes. There's one hero in the Bible, that's Jesus. And I read this and I go, he decides to expose the assassination plot at risk to his own life. And then one would moderately expect what to come after that. A reward. What's the next sentence in the storyline about who gets promoted? Haman. I don't think Mordecai was drawing some holy, bold line of courageous stand for God out of the blue when he's been in Persia his whole life, completely assimilated into the culture, eating their food. Hey, pass this ham sandwich. Yeah, I'll have bacon on that. Thank you very much. Breaking all sorts of dietary laws, doing his thing. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, come in, hey, is there a virgin here? A Persian? Oh, yeah, right here. Yeah, let her go. Persia bachelorette. Go get him, honey. I mean, all that. And then he's going to draw a line by not bowing to Haman, really? And commentators try to let off the hook. Well, it would have violated his conscience. I'm like, baloney. His conscience is long time past seared. It wasn't a compromise of idolatry or worship of the one true God. It's just a sign of respect and honor. I think Mordecai was jealous. I think he was jealous of a man that got promoted over him, and he thought he deserved it. And I'm not bowing to that dirtbag because he's in my spot. He's riding my horse. He's in my palace. He's wearing my robes. He's got my ring. He's got the king's ear that I should have. I think Mordecai is jealous. And he plays the Jewish card to excuse his jealousy and get him off the hook. That's convenient Christianity. You know anybody like that? You don't know they're Christians until it becomes convenient for them? It's a weird place to draw the line. Compromise, assimilation, capitulation, compromise, and then hey, will you shake his hand? Oh no, I'm a Christian. Really? That's how many of you are just drunken thieves until all of a sudden your friends want to do something terrible and you're like, oh, I can't do it, I'm a Christian. And they're like, what kind of Christian are you? You're like, I'm a hypocrite. We have a huge denomination. Right? So you play the Jesus card when it's convenient. Pull it out, yeah, keep it in there. Pull it out, yeah, no, keep it in there. Hand it to somebody else for a while, and they won't find it on me. How many of you are like Mordecai in your hypocrisy? Either in your cultural Christianity, in your assimilation into the culture, or your convenient Christianity, I'll play the card if it benefits me. It's a question worth asking. It's a question worth asking because God's going to ask you about it too. So how are you like Mordecai? Question number 2, how are you like Xerxes? Operative word here, greed. Haman appeals to Xerxes' greed, and his greed makes him several things. One, it makes him lazy. Makes him lazy. He's willing to swallow facts he knows probably aren't true. He's willing to listen to slander and gossip he knows are probably baseless, but he's willing to do it because it's going to, if he buys into the narrative, it'll benefit his bottom line. And how many of you have given ear to facts or stories about people that either you know aren't true or you couldn't know whether or not it's true, and you're like, really? Tell me more so I can pray. And then you just feed and you fan the kind of slander and gossip and twisting of facts that always and only brings death and destruction to somebody, including yourself later. But his greed makes him not only lazy, his greed makes him cold. With a swish of his finger, boom, entire people group gone. He sits down, has a beer, smokes a stogie, fist bump, well done. Greed makes you lazy, it makes you cold, it makes you indifferent, and it makes you foolish. Greed makes you foolish. This is the third time we've seen him take stupid counsel and turn the gears of the empire to grinding, spending massive economical resources to do something really quite stupid. Right? The first time was to what? You remember? Send out word to everybody to tell the women that they have to submit their husband or how much of a slime bag he is, almost assuring domestic abuse throughout his entire kingdom. Wheels grinding number 2. Hey, go out and gather up all the eligible virgins, bring them in. I'll try them out and pick the one I like. And now number 3, send out this command to let people know that we're going to wipe out and annihilate an entire people group. He's foolishly falling to wise counsel over and over and over again. And we need to be careful and cautious not to say, I'm glad I'm not like Xerxes, but rather to say, where am I like Xerxes? giving ear to bad counsel, giving ear to slander, giving ear to gossip, because it might be to my gain to play along with the game. So how are you like Mordecai in his hypocrisy? How are you like King Xerxes in his greed? And I know it's such an encouraging sermon. I'm glad you came this morning. Happy birthday. Last question, doesn't get much better. How are you like Haman? Operative word here being pride. How are you like Haman? Operative word being pride. 3 expressions of this here, and then we'll tease it out a little bit. Number 1, he doesn't talk to the person he's in conflict with, he talks about them. So he's got this beef with Mordecai, but rather than being a man and mature and going, hey man, have I hurt you or something? What's going on? We got an honor and respect thing here? No, he's like, I want that guy, and I want that guy's people. I'm going to go after him. What can I do? Oh, he's passive aggressive. I'll go talk about him, not to him. And how many times have you, because you've been hurt or offended or disrespected, perceivably so, talk about someone, not to them? That's a grievous, grievous sin with the root of pride underneath it. Anytime you catch yourself talking about someone when you should talk to them, you need to have an internal check. Go, whoa. You know what? I think I just need to back up here. I apologize. I should not have said that. I haven't talked to them yet, and I don't want to be like Haman. Should say that next time. Who? Long story. Number 2, he tells the story in a way that benefits him at the expense of the truth. Question, how many times have you told stories that benefit you at the expense of the truth? This is, you are so good that you don't even do it consciously. Like if I leave this out, if I twist that, if I shade that. No, I do this. I mean, I was a born shader. Just shade a little bit here, shade a little bit there, and all of a sudden the whole picture looks different. Like I'm a master at that. Anybody with me? Am I the only one? I was expecting more heads to nod. It's like, oh, okay, well now you know me. Right? I'll tell a story and I'll shade the truth and leave a few things out. I mean, I didn't lie. I didn't say something untruthful. I just left facts out that would have actually led them to the truth conveniently so that they understand now what I want them to understand. That is a grievous, grievous sin with the root of pride underneath it. Thirdly, we see that Haman builds a case to destroy his enemy. And this is a more difficult question to ask, but I think it should be asked. And in this climate of our culture, I don't want to be taken wrongly, but if you could kill somebody, who would it be? God gave you one card, you know what I mean? Good for one, whacking. They're gone. Who would it be? You think that's a terrible question to ask? Really? You know what Jesus said? He said, here's the deal. If you have anger in your heart towards somebody, that's murder. So anger in your heart towards somebody and murder are 2 realities on the same highway. One's just a little further down the road. And because we don't have legal precedent or capacity to, we're restrained by the law, thanks be to God. But let's not think there's not a lot of murderers in here who have wished in their heart somebody was dead. Oh, so angry, frustrated. If they weren't here, it'd be so much better. That's not a small thing. Jesus upped the ante significantly when he said, if you hate your brother, if you speak poorly against him, if you speak angrily against him, that's like committing murder in your heart. The sin's, in God's eyes, it's already done. Whether or not the sin actually makes its way out to your hands, the destruction has already been accomplished in your heart toward them. So, what is pride? What is pride? Pride is concentration and absorption on self. Biblical definition of pride, it is concentration and absorption on self. Pride, C.S. Lewis put it this way. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next man. It is the comparison that makes you proud, the pleasure of being above the rest. Once the elements of competitions are gone, pride is gone. Let me read it again from C.S. Lewis in his chapter on pride and mere Christianity. Pride gets no pleasure out of having something. All right, so pride robs you of the joy of the thing. You're now using the thing to get something better in your mind, perceived as better. So no pleasure out of having something, only out of having more of it than the next guy. It is the comparison that makes you proud. The pleasure of being above the rest. Once the element of competition is gone, pride is gone. C.S. Lewis said later in the chapter, pride is ruthless, it is sleepless, it is unsmiling. It is the ruthless, sleepless, unsmiling concentration on self. Pride turns everything as a means to an end. It's a means to get something. More respect, more approval. Pride creates the endless ego calculation in your mind. That's why it's sleepless. You're always asking, am I respected enough? Am I honored enough? Am I appreciated enough? Am I being regarded enough? And because pride focuses on self, there's actually two expressions of it. One is superiority, right? Easy to see, always doing self-calculation, and things are adding up. The other expression of pride that we don't often think of is not superiority, but inferiority. You're down on yourself, don't like how you're doing, always beating yourself up, super self-conscious, super self-absorbed. You're just as self-absorbed as the superiority complex guy. You're just doing the comparisons and you're not measuring up and making out so well. So the superiority guy and the inferiority gal have just as much in common with each other, although we tend to measure the one higher than the other. By definition, it's a self-absorption of oneself, and therefore it is pride. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less, C.S. Lewis said. So it's not humble to be like, oh, shucks, I'm nothing, I'm terrible, oh, you know. Because oftentimes that's just like a back door to get things that you want, right? Accolades. That's false humility, that's pride, that's not humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself, oh, woe is me. Humility is just thinking of yourself less. I don't think of myself. It's not even in my mind. That's a God-granted, grace-given self-forgetfulness that you can't do on your own apart from Jesus. Because the only thing that can draw your attention off yourself is the fixation of a vision greater than yourself. And Jesus is the only one that can lift your eyes off yourself in that way. So here's what pride does for you. We got to be quick. Pride makes you foolish, okay? Here in the story, it makes you foolish because you don't learn from your mistakes. You're constantly self-justifying yourself. It's them, it's her, it's him, it's all those folks over there. You can't laugh at yourself and learn from your mistakes, which means you constantly, in general, make foolish decisions over and over and over. If you look back in your life and there is a series of foolish decisions, one after, I don't mean mistakes, I mean foolish decisions, one after another, you can probably know there's pride at the root of it because you're not learning from them. See, because superiority makes you overestimate your gifts. I got this. Inferiority makes you underestimate your gifts and you're always feeling down on yourself. Both are raw expressions of pride. Pride number two makes you evil. It makes you evil. Because pride is not just one sin in a list of many sins. Pride is the sin underneath all other sins. So take bitterness, for instance. Underneath bitterness, you're bitter at your husband. Okay? You know? He's not fair to you, or he's not nice to you, or he doesn't love you, or he's wronged you. Or you're bitter to your wife because she doesn't, whatever. Or you're bitter to a friend, or you're bitter to a mom or dad because they make you do something that you don't like, or you're bitter to fill in the blank, right? You can't be bitter without pride because your bitterness is rooted in the belief that you're better than them and you would have done differently had you been in their place. You can't be bitter without being prideful. Or take, for instance, fear and anxiety. Some people are paralyzed by fear. Where does that come from? It comes from the belief that you know what should be done in the future and are afraid that your current ability to control that cannot come about, which now creates fear and anxiety of what might happen. What's at the bottom of that? The pride of thinking you know what's best for your life in the future. How do you know what's best? I don't know, I just do. That's pride. And we could go on and on, right? Underneath all of the sins that we so easily engage in is the root of pride. It makes you evil. How about social evils? Racism, injustice, imperialism. It's all pride. Pride makes you evil. And we see pride turn Haman's heart evil in this story so that it is bent on destruction. Lastly, pride makes you dead. Pride makes you dead. C.S. Lewis said, pride is the carbon monoxide of sin, hiding itself while it kills oneself. The more proud you are, the less proud you think you are. Because nobody confuses adultery, right? No one says like, oh my goodness, you're not my wife. Right? You know you're committing adultery. Nobody commits embezzlement and is like, oh my goodness. Like, how did those $300,000 get in my bank account? That's crazy. Did I get a bonus last week? Somebody tipped really good at the restaurant? You know what you're doing. But pride is that subtle sin that the more you do, the less you see it. Joseph Epstein said this. He said, so many people hate snobs. But you can only hate snobs if you think you're better than the snobs, which is kind of snobby. That's pride, right? Or even better, make my point a little sharper. Up until now, how many of you have been hoping and thinking that someone else you know will hear the sermon on pride? To get this far into the sermon, hoping your spouse is listening or your kids are listening, takes quite a bit of pride. Right? Pride's hideous. It's everywhere. C.S. Lewis said, as long as you are proud, you cannot know God. A proud man is always looking down on things and people, and of course, as long as you are looking down on things and people, you cannot see the one who is above. Pride makes you dead. It makes you dead to God. So why are we asking these questions? Because you guys are leaders in your families, you're leaders in your community, you're leaders in your business, you're leaders where you work, you're leaders by nature of God's given you influence. And what I never want to have happen at Grace City Church is we read stories here and we go, I'm glad I'm not like Mordecai, the hypocrite. I'm glad I'm not like Xerxes, the greedy materialist. I'm glad I'm not like Haman, the dirtbag, pride-filled, self-absorbed guy. When are we getting to the hero story so I can have somebody to relate to? We got to always learn to read the story and go, you know what? Apart from me, that's me. Apart from the grace of God, I'm that guy. Apart from the grace of God, I'm that girl. Apart from the grace of God, I'm all three wrapped into one complicated mess of a sinner. And until we get there, we'll be in this very dangerous, hideous, most complex form of pride, which is religiosity. Where we think because we do certain things and don't do certain things, we're better than anybody else. And that is a poison and cancer that will rot the gospel heart out of any church. Which is why we need to learn to ask these questions and read the Bible with a mirror. And before we're too quick to be like, oh my goodness, can you imagine someone giving somebody else the power to exterminate an entire people group? Genocide, that sounds terrible. Until you realize that we vote people into power in our country that continue to legalize mass extermination of human life through abortion. And this isn't even a sermon on that, but just a side note. Let's not get too high and haughty on our high horse about the Persians without realizing that we're making the Persians look like a junior high. I don't know what junior hires do. Father-daughter dance. How about that? I don't know. I was like, where am I going with that, Josh? I don't know, but they're all waiting for you to say something. Okay, here we go. So where's the turn? Where's the good news of the gospel in Esther chapter 3? It's there. Did you see it? This is subtle storytelling at its best. The point of Esther is not to go, look, Jesus. The point of the book of Esther is to go, you know what, where there's no extraordinary move of God, he's still powerfully working in the ordinary circumstances of life. Do you see him? Did you see it here in the text? Look at verse 13. Letters were sent by countries to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children. So this is the verse that's painting for us the most detailed picture of this hideously demonic and evil embodiment that's going to of evil that's going to destroy an entire people group. And then look at what it says. In one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. What day was? Could you read that again? What day was that? King's rider comes into town, reads it. Now, why is that date so important? Because if you were reading this story as a Jew, two things would immediately jump off the page at you. Number one, you'd be reminded that that date was not chosen by accident. That date was chosen by God. Remember how that date got chosen? Haman casting lots, hoping to seek divination from the gods to pick a day when he could exterminate the race that he wanted to kill. But what would the Jew know who had read the Torah? That Proverbs 16 says, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. Second thing that would jump off the page to a Jew reading that date is that they would immediately recognize it as significant because it was the day they would celebrate Passover Eve. Remember the story of the Passover? People of God in captivity, being abused, beaten. He promises to set them free. You remember where we started, Esther, with the two questions we said were over the book of Esther? Question number 1, is God at work even if we can't see him? Question number 2, will God save us and deliver us from captivity even if it's of our own choosing and self-inflicted? To which the author begins hinting at the answer. Passover, Israelites in Egypt under persecution, slavery. God says salvation is coming. Salvation is coming. Salvation is coming. On the eve of the Passover, I want you to kill the fatted calf. I want you to do a public act of obedience of faith. I want you to smear it over the doorpost. And so when the angel of death, sent not from Xerxes or Pharaoh, but from God, comes to the area, and he sees your public act of faith and identification with Yahweh, he will pass by, and you'll be delivered and saved. And every year after that day, they were passed over for judgment and delivered from their certain death. They celebrated that deliverance. And now, by random happenstance, this guy in the line of King Agag, the Amalekites, the Agagite, casts lots and picks a day for our destruction on the day when our forefathers, in obedience of faith, put blood over the doorpost. What's God saying? Salvation's coming. Salvation's coming. Salvation's coming. Even when you cannot see him act in extraordinary ways like plagues, he is nevertheless working through ordinary circumstances of life to bring about his purposes. Miracles expressed or not, he's still God. And so we see here the work of what we would say is the better advocate, because all of this is leading us and leading us towards Jesus. 1 Corinthians 5, behold the Lamb of God who takes the sin of the world, away the sin of the world. Paul's referencing Jesus' story there. And if we forget that we're prone to be like Xerxes, greedy, lazy, indifferent, self-indulgent, that we're prone to be like Mordecai, cultural Christian, compromising Christian, we're prone to be like Haman, consumed with others might think about us in pride, we'll forget that we need an advocate because there is a price tag coming that we can't pay. And so the big idea is that Jesus is a better advocate. Ironically, Jesus had far more reason to act against us than Haman ever had to act against Mordecai or the Jews. We have not kept God's laws. We have refused to bow down to him and submit to him and give him honor and respect. And it is actually true in our case that it was not in God's interest to tolerate us. And like Haman, Satan is a happy advocate for our destruction, presenting plenty of valid reasons why God should destroy us and not allow us to live. The edict for our eternal destruction could have been signed and delivered by God and carried out, and injustice would not have been done. But thanks be to God, that's not how he's chosen to deal with us. Because you see, Jesus is a better advocate than Haman. Haman advocated for the lives of those whom he perceived had dishonored him to be destroyed. That was his advocation. Destroy them. But Jesus advocates for the lives of those who have dishonored him to be spared. Listen to Luke 23, verse 34. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided up his clothes while he looked on and cast lots. Jesus spoke those words, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they were doing, while he was pinned and impaled on a cross. Haman advocated for his enemies to be destroyed so he could profit financially from their destruction, but Jesus advocates for his enemies to be spared at great cost to himself. Listen to Paul in 2 Corinthians 8. For you know the grace of God our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. See the difference yet? You see, Haman advocated for the destruction of his enemies in order to promote himself. Jesus advocated for the salvation of his enemies at the cost of humbling himself. Listen to Philippians chapter 2, verse 8. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, Jesus being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Haman advocated for the killing of his enemies in order to take their money and make himself wealthy. Jesus advocates for his enemies by sacrificing his place of power and wealth in order to save his enemies and make them wealthy. Haman advocated for the killing and plundering of his enemies. Jesus handed himself over to the enemy to be plundered and killed. Haman and King Xerxes made a rash and foolish decision that went out and would affect thousands upon thousands of people across their empire, different tribes, different nations, different tongues, under their rule and their reign. But Jesus and God the Father made a decision in the council of the wisdom of the Trinity, not in a moment's notice, but in time before time began past, that would not spread death in letters across their empire, but that would save their enemies and then send their enemies out as letters to be read throughout the empire. Not about death coming, but life coming. Listen to how Paul says it in 2 Corinthians 2. You yourselves are our letters, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Jesus advocates for his enemies to be saved and then sends them out across the empire as good news scrolls to be unrolled and read publicly before all the people, that there is life coming. There is a death sentence that can be avoided. There is an advocate for you, not back at Susa with the dirtbag king. There is an advocate for you in heaven with the Father, making a plea right now for you to be saved. Jesus declares life and then writes life on the scroll of your life and then sends you out in the world to be read. Listen how John said it in 1 John. My dear children, I write this to you so that you will not sin. But if anybody does sin, nobody raised their hand, unanimous, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous one. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only for our sins, but also for the sins of the whole world. Haman's hate was directed at a few in the empire. Jesus' love is aimed at everyone living under the bondage of the empire of darkness, inviting them into the kingdom of light and life. So yeah, you may have lived like or living like Mordecai, the compromising, cultural, convenient Christian. You may be living like Haman, the materialistic, greedy person, giving only thought to your bottom line in every choice you make. You may have been living like King Xerxes, the greedy man, the prideful man. But there's news for you today, and it's good. And it's that there's an advocate not shading the facts about you to burn you down, but telling the facts as they are, and then being willing to take your place so your punishment would become his. That's been the message of Grace City for 10 years. And that will be the message of Grace City Church until God takes our breath away. That there is a better advocate in the city for you, the one who is lost. God has called us as a church, as Grace City Church, to spend our lives as scrolls unrolled publicly to the world, to be read and to be received as good news. Not just talking about good news, but embodying good news to the world. That's what Groundbreaking's about. That's what this afternoon's about. That's what the mission of Grace City Church is about, to help more people meet Jesus, love Jesus, and follow Jesus, the better advocate. And so, Father, I'm asking that you would, even now, help us to see Jesus as more glorious than maybe we've ever seen him before. Not as the one who makes his case against us, and judges us rightly so, but the one who makes his case against us and then stands forward to take our punishment that we might be set free. And Father, would we leave here not as people who are more confident in their abilities, but more confident in Jesus and his work. May we leave here as people who, seeing Jesus, resolve again and anew and afresh to live a life as an unrolled scroll before the public, watching, reading, observing world, not reading a proclamation of death, but reading a proclamation of life through Jesus Christ.